Hey guys, it's been a while. So I don't remember if I said this in my last video, but things are super crazy right now. I'm costuming a show, so I've been spending so much of my time taking care of that. But I'm back with another chapter. Hope you haven't been missing it too much. Probably not, but that's okay. So this is chapter 50, Hades' story. Scarcely had the horses turned the corner of the boulevard when Albert looked at the Count and burst into a loud fit of laughter, so loud that it was obviously forced. "Well," said he, "I will ask you the same question King Charles put to Catherine de' Medici after the massacre of St. Bartholomew. How do you think I played my part?" "In what respect?" asked Monte Cristo. "Why, with regard to the reception of my rival and your protege, Monsieur Andrea Cavalcanti, in the bosom of the Danglars family. None of your poor jokes, Viscount. Monsieur Andrea is no protege of mine, at any rate not so far as Monsieur Danglars is concerned. That is just what I should reproach you with, if the young man had any need of protection. Happily for me, he can dispense with it. What, do you think he is paying her attentions? I am sure of it. He makes eyes at her, sighs, and speaks to her in amorous tones. He aspires to the hand of the proud Eugenie. What does it matter so long as they favor you? Don't say that, Count. I am being repulsed from two sides. Mademoiselle Eugenie scarcely answered me today, while Mademoiselle d'Amélie, her confidante, did not answer me at all. As to the father, I will warrant that within a week he will shut the door in my face." "You are quite mistaken, my dear Viscount. Have you proofs? Do you want one?" "Yes." "Well, then, I have been requested to ask the Count of Monte to come to some definite arrangement with the Baron." "Who requested you?" "The Baron himself." "Oh, you surely will not do that, will you?" said Albert coaxingly. "Oh, yes, I shall, since I have promised to." "Come now," said Albert with a sigh, "you are absolutely determined to make me marry." "I only wish to be on good terms with everyone." The carriage stopped. "Here we are," said Monte Cristo. "It is only 10:30. Will you come in with me?" "With pleasure." They both entered the house. The salon was lit up. "Give us some tea, Baptistin," said the Count. Baptistin went out without saying a word. 2 minutes later he reappeared with a tray laden with all his master's requirements, as though, like the supper tables in fairy plays, it had sprung up from the earth. "Really, Count," said Moncouf, "what I admire in you is not your wealth, for there are perhaps others richer than you. It is not your wit. Beaumarchais had no more, but he had as much as you. No, what I admire is your way of being served without a question, to the minute, to the second, as though your servants guessed what you desired by your manner of sounding the gong, and as though everything were ready and waiting upon your desire. What you say is more or less true. My servants know my habits. I will give you an instance. Is there nothing you would like to have with your tea? Indeed there is. I should dearly love a smoke." Monte Cristo went up to the gong and sounded it once. Within a second a private door opened, and Ali appeared with 2 chibouques filled with excellent latakia. "It is wonderful," said Moncouf. "Oh no, it is quite simple," said Monte Cristo. "Ali knows that I generally smoke when I am drinking tea or coffee. He knows I have asked for tea, also that you came in with me. On hearing the gong, he guessed my desire, and, coming from a country where the chibouque plays an essential part in hospitality, he brings in 2 of them. This is certainly quite a simple explanation, but it is nevertheless true that you alone— But what is it that I hear?" he added, bending his ear toward a door through which sounds were issuing similar to those of a guitar. "You are doomed to have music this evening, Viscount. You have only just escaped Mademoiselle Danglars' piano, and now you have to submit to Hades' Guzla." "Haydée? What a charming name! Are there really women elsewhere than in Byron's poems with the name of Haydée?" "Certainly. It may be a common name in France, but it is common enough in Albania and Epirus. It is as though you said, for instance, chastity, modesty, innocence. It is a baptismal name, as you Parisians call it." "How very charming! How I should like to hear our French girls called Mademoiselle Goodness, Mademoiselle Silence, Mademoiselle Christian Charity. I say, supposing Mademoiselle Claire Marie Eugenie Danglars were called Mademoiselle Chastity, Modesty, Innocence Danglars, What a fine effect it would have when the banns of marriage were published. You are mad, said the Count. Do not joke so loud, Haidee might hear you. Would she be annoyed? Certainly not, said the Count. A slave has no right to be annoyed with her master. Now it is you who are joking. There are no slaves now. Since Haidee is my slave, there must be. Really, Count, you have nothing and do nothing like other people. Monte Cristo's slave. What a position in France. To judge from the lavish way in which you spend your money, it must be worth 100,000 crowns a year. 100,000 crowns! That poor child possesses a great deal more than that. She came into the world to a cradle lined with treasures compared with which those in 1,001 Nights are as naught. Is she a real princess, then? She is. One of the greatest in her country. I thought as much. But tell me, how did such a princess become your slave? You are one of my friends and will not chatter. Do you promise to keep a secret? On my word of honor. Do you know the history of the Pasha of Janina? Of Ali Tepelin? Surely, since my father made his fortune in his service. True, I had forgotten that. Well, what has Haidee to do with Ali Tepelin? She is merely his daughter. What? The daughter of Ali Pasha, your slave? Oh, dear me, yes. But how comes it? Simply that I was passing through the market at Constantinople one day and bought her. Wonderful. With you, Count, life seems a dream. Now listen, I am going to ask you something very indiscreet. Say on. Since you go out with her and take her to the opera, well, will you introduce me to your princess? With pleasure, but on 2 conditions. I accept them in advance. The first is that you never tell anyone of this introduction. The second is that you do not tell her that your father served under her father. Very well, Moncrief held up his hand. I swear I will not. The Count again struck the gong, whereupon Ali appeared, and Monte Cristo said to him, Inform your mistress that I am coming to take my coffee with her, and give her to understand that I ask permission to introduce one of my friends to her. Ali bowed and retired. Then it is understood that you will not ask her any direct questions. If you wish to know anything, tell me and I will ask her. Agreed. Ali reappeared for the 3rd time and held up the door curtain as an indication to his master and Albert that they were welcome. Let us go, said Monte Cristo. Albert passed his hand through his hair and curled his moustache, while the Count took his hat, put on his gloves, and preceded Albert into the room, which was guarded by Ali as advance guard and defended by 3 French maids under his command. Haidee was awaiting them in her salon, her eyes wide open with surprise. This was the first time that any other man than Monte Cristo had found his way to her room. She was seated in a corner of a sofa with her legs crossed under her, thus making, as it were, a nest of the richly embroidered striped Eastern material that fell in soft folds around her. Beside her was the instrument whose sounds had revealed her presence, although altogether she made a charming picture. Whom do you bring to me? The girl asked Monte Cristo in Romiac. A brother, a friend, a simple acquaintance, or an enemy? A friend, replied Monte Cristo in the same language. His name? Count Albert. It is he whom I delivered from the hands of the bandits in Rome. In what tongue do you wish me to speak to him? Monte Cristo turned toward Albert with the question, Do you speak modern Greek? Alas, not even ancient Greek, said Albert. Never have Homer and Plato had a more unworthy, I might almost say contemptuous, scholar than my French. Then I shall use the French or Italian tongue if my lord wishes me to speak at all, responded Haidee, showing by this remark that she had understood the Count's question, and Albert's answer. Monte Cristo thought for a moment. You will speak in Italian, said he at last. Then turning toward Albert, it is a pity that you do not speak either modern or ancient Greek. Haidee speaks both to perfection, and the poor girl may give you a wrong impression of herself by being forced to speak in Italian. He made a sign to Haidee. Welcome, my friend, who have come hither with my lord and master, said the girl in excellent Tuscan, with the soft Roman accent which makes the language of Dante as sonorous as that of Homer. Ali, bring coffee and pipes, she then added. Ali went to execute his young mistress's order, while Monte Cristo and Albert drew their seats up to a table, which contained a nargile as its centerpiece, and on which were arranged flowers, drawings, and music albums. Ali returned with the coffee and the chaboks, but Albert refused the pipe the Nubian offered him. Take it, said Monte Cristo. Haiti is almost as civilized as a Parisian. Havanas are distasteful to her because she does not like their strong odor, but Eastern tobacco is a perfume, you must know. Haiti put out her hand and, encircling the cup of Japanese china with her dainty pink fingers, carried it to her lips with the simple pleasure of a child drinking or eating something it likes. At the same time, two women entered carrying trays laden with ices and sherbet, which they placed on two small tables intended for that purpose. Pray excuse my amazement, said Albert in Italian. I am quite bewildered, and it could not well be otherwise. But a few months ago I heard the rumbling of the omnibuses and the tinkling of the lemonade sellers' bells, yet here I am transported to the East, the true East, not as I have seen it, unfortunately, but as I have pictured it to myself in the dreams I have dreamt in the heart of Paris. Oh, Signora, if only I could speak Greek, your conversation, coupled with these fairy-like surroundings, would afford an evening that would ever remain in my memory. I speak Italian well enough to converse with you, monsieur, said Haiti calmly. If you love the East, I will do my best to bring its atmosphere to you. Albert turned toward Haiti, saying, At what age did you leave Greece, Signora? When I was 5 years old, responded Haiti. Do you remember your country? When I close my eyes, I seem to see once more all that I have ever seen. We have a twofold power of vision, that of the body and that of the mind. Whereas the body may sometimes forget the impressions it has received, the mind never does. How far back does your memory go? To the time when I could scarcely walk. How old were you at the time? 3 years, said Haiti. Do you then remember everything that happened around you from the time you were 3 years of age? Everything. Count, said Marcof to Monte Cristo, you should let the Signora tell us something of her sad history. You have forbidden me to mention my father to her, but perhaps she may speak of him herself. And you have no idea what happiness it would give me to hear his name pronounced by those beautiful lips. Monte Cristo turned toward Haiti, and making a sign to her to pay great attention to the injunction he was about to impose on her, he said in Greek, Tell us your father's fate, but mention not the treason nor the name of the traitor. Haiti sighed deeply, and a dark cloud passed over her beautiful brow. You are still young, Signora, said Albert, taking refuge in the banality in spite of himself. What sufferings can you have experienced? Haiti looked at Monte Cristo, who made an almost imperceptible sign to her, murmuring, Tell it all. Nothing makes such a deep impression on our minds as our earliest memories, and all those of my childhood are mingled with sadness. Do you really wish me to relate them? I implore you to tell them, said Albert. Well, I was 4 years old when I was awakened one evening by my mother. We were at the palace at Janina. She snatched me up with the cushions on which I was laying, and when I opened my eyes I perceived that hers were filled with big tears. She carried me away without a word. On seeing her weeping, I began to cry too. Be quiet, child, she said. At any other time, no matter what my mother might do to console me, or what threats she held out to me, I should have continued to cry. But this time there was such a note of terror in her voice that I stopped instantly. She bore me rapidly away. Then I perceived that we were going down a wide staircase, and rushing on in front of us were my mother's women, carrying trunks, bags, clothing, jewelry, and purses filled with gold. Behind the women came a guard of 20 men armed with long rifles and pistols and clad in the uniform which must be familiar to you in France now that Greece has once more become independent. Believe me, continued Haiti, shaking her head and turning pale at the thought of the scene, there was something ominous in this long line of slaves and women all heavy with sleep, or at least I thought they were, though perhaps it may only have been that I was only half awake myself. I imagined that they were still as sleepy as I. Gigantic shadows thrown by the flickering light of the pine torches chased each other along the walls of the staircase and descended to the very vaults. Quickly, quickly, said a voice from the end of the gallery, and everyone bent forward like a field of corn bowed down by the passing wind. It was my father's voice. He marched in the rearmost, clad in his most splendid robes and holding in his hand the carbine your emperor gave him. Leaning on his favorite Selim, he drove us on before him as a shepherd drives his straggling flock. My father, continued Haiti, raising her head, was an illustrious man known in Europe under the name of Ali Tabelen, Pasha of Janina, before whom all Turkey trembled. Without any apparent reason, Albert shuddered on hearing these words uttered with such unspeakable pride and dignity. There seemed to be something terrifying and somber lurking in the maiden's eyes. Soon we came to a halt. We had reached the bottom of the staircase and were on the borders of a lake. My mother pressed me to her heaving bosom, and 2 paces from us I saw my father looking anxiously round him. Before us were 4 marble steps, at the bottom of which was a small boat. In the middle of the lake a black object was discernible. It was the kiosk to which we were going. It looked to me to be very far away, but that was probably owing to the darkness of the night. We stepped into the boat. I remember noticing that there was no sound as the oars skimmed the water, and I leaned over to look for the cause. They were muffled with the sashes of 4 palikars. Besides the oarsmen, there was no one in the boat but some women, my father, my mother, Selim, and myself. The palikars had remained on the edge of the lake to protect us in case of pursuit. Our bark sped like the wind. "Why is our boat going so fast?" I asked my mother. "Hush, child, hush," she said. "It is because we are fleeing." I did not understand. Why should my father, the all-powerful one, flee? He before whom others were accustomed to flee. He who had taken as his device, "They hate me, therefore they fear me." My father was indeed fleeing across the lake. He told me later that the garrison of Janina Castle, tired of long service— Here Haiti cast a questioning look at Monte Cristo, who had never taken his eyes off her. She then continued slowly, as though inventing or suppressing some part of her narrative. "You were saying, Signora," returned Albert, who was paying the utmost attention to the recital, "that the garrison of Janina, tired of long service, had treated with the Saraskir Korschid sent by the Sultan to seize my father. Upon learning this, Ali Tabilin sent to the Sultan a fresh officer in whom he placed his entire confidence, and then resolved to retire to the place of retreat he had long since prepared himself, to which he had given the name of Catafion, which means his refuge." "Do you recollect the officer's name, Signora?" Albert asked. Monte Cristo exchanged a lightning-like glance with the girl, which was unobserved by Malkoff. "No, I do not recollect his name," she said, "but it may come to my mind later on." Albert was about to mention his father's name when Monte Cristo quickly held up his finger, enjoining silence, and, remembering his oath, the young man obeyed. It was toward this kiosk that we were making our way. From the outside, the kiosk appeared to consist of nothing more than a ground floor ornamented with arabesques, and a terrace leading down to the water, and another story overlooking the lake. Under the ground floor, however, was a vast subterranean cave extending the whole length of the island, whither my mother and myself, together with womenfolk, were taken, and where 60,000 bags and 200 casks were piled up in a heap. The bags contained 25 millions in gold, and the casks were filled with 30,000 pounds of powder. Near these casks stood Selim, my father's favorite slave, whom I mentioned just now. Night and day he stood on guard, holding a lance at the top of which was a lighted match. His orders were that directly my father gave him the signal, he was to blow up everything: kiosk, guards, women, gold, and the Pasha himself. I still see before me the pale-faced, black-eyed young soldier, and when the angel of death comes to fetch me, I am sure I shall recognize Selim. I cannot tell you how long we waited thus, for at that period I was ignorant of the meaning of time. Sometimes, though rarely, my father would summon my mother and me to the terrace of the palace. There were hours of real pleasure for me, for in the cave I heard nothing but the wailing of the slaves, and saw nothing but Selim's fiery lance. Seated before a large aperture, my father would try to pierce the black horizon. He examined every tiny speck that appeared in the lake, whilst my mother reclined at his side with her head upon his shoulder, and I played at his feet. One morning my father sent for us. We found him quite calm, but paler than usual. "Have courage, Vasiliki," he said to my mother. "Today my lord's fireman arrives, and my fate will be decided. If I am pardoned, we shall return to Janina in triumph. But if the news is bad, we shall flee tonight." What if they do not let us flee?" "Set your mind at rest on that score," replied Ali with a smile. "Selim and his fiery lance will settle them. They want my death, but they will not want to die with me." My mother's sighs were her only answer to this poor consolation. She prepared some iced water, which he drank incessantly, for since his retreat to the kiosk he had been the victim of a burning fever. Then she anointed his beard and lighted his jabot. Sometimes she would sit for hours together pulling at his shibboleth abstractedly and watching the smoke ascend and dwindle into nothingness. All of a sudden he started up abruptly. Without taking his eyes from the object which was attracting his attention, he asked for his telescope, and my mother, wider than the stucco against which she was leaning, gave it to him. I saw my father's hands trembling. A ship. 2, 3, 4, he murmured. With that he rose, and as I sit here, I can still see him priming his pistols. Vasiliki, he said to my mother, visibly trembling, the time has now come when our fate will be decided, for in half an hour we shall learn the sublime Sultan's answer. Go to the cave with Haiti. I will not leave you, said Vasiliki. If you die, my master, I will die with you. Go and stay with Selim, cried my father. Farewell, my lord, murmured my mother, obedient to the end, and bowed down to the near approach of death. Take Vasiliki away, he said to one of the palikars. But I, whom they had forgotten, ran up to him and held out my arms to him. He saw me and bending down pressed his lips to my forehead. All this time, 20 palikars, hidden by the carved woodwork, were seated at my father's feet, watching with bloodshot eyes the arrival of the boats. Their long guns, inlaid with mother of pearl and silver, were ready to hand, and a large number of cartridges were strewn about the floor. My father looked at his watch and began pacing up and down with a look of anguish on his face. This was the scene which impressed itself on my mind when I left my father after he had given me that last kiss. My mother and I went down to the cave. Selim was still at his point and gave us a sad smile. We fetched some cushions from the other side of the cave and seated ourselves beside him. Devoted hearts seek one another in times of danger, and child though I was, I instinctively sensed that some great danger was hanging over our heads. These sad reminiscences appeared for a single instant to have deprived Haiti of the power of speech. Her head fell into her hands like a flower bowed down by the force of a storm, and her eyes gazed into vacancy as though she were conjuring up before her mind the verdant summit of Pindus and the blue waters of Lake Janina, which reflected like a magic mirror the grim picture she was sketching. Monte Cristo looked at her with an indefinable expression of interest and pity. Continue, my child, he said to her in Romaic. Haiti raised her head as though the sonorous words uttered by Monte Cristo had awakened her from a dream, and she resumed her narrative. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but whereas the day was brilliant and bright outside, we in the cave were plunged in darkness. One single light shone in our cave like a solitary star twinkling in a dark and cloud-covered sky. It was Selim's match. From time to time, Selim repeated the sacred words, Allah is great. My mother was a Christian, and she prayed incessantly, but she still had a ray of hope. When she was leaving the terrace, she had thought she recognized the Frenchman who had been sent to Constantinople, and in whom my father placed implicit confidence, for he well knew that the soldiers of the French king were generally noble and generous. She advanced toward the staircase and listened. They are drawing near, she said. If only they bring life and peace to us. What do you fear, Vasiliki? Vasiliki, replied Selim in a voice so gentle and at the same time so proud. If they do not bring peace, we will give them death. And he revived the flame of his lance. But I, who was only an unsophisticated child, was frightened by his courage, which appeared to me both ferocious and intense, and I was filled with alarm by the atmosphere of death I seemed to feel all around me and to see in Selim's flame. My mother must have had the same impression, for I felt her shudder. Oh, Mamma, I cried. Are we going to die? May God preserve you, my child, from ever desiring the death you fear today, said my mother. Then in a low voice to Selim, what are my master's orders? If he sends me his poniard, it signifies that the Sultan has refused his pardon, and I am to apply the match. If he sends me his ring, it means that the Sultan pardons him, and I am to hand over the powder. Friend, said my mother, when the master's order arrives, and if it be the poniard he sends, we will both bare our throats to you, and do you kill us with the same poniard instead of dispatching us by that terrible death we both fear. I will, Vasiliki, was Selim's calm reply. All of a sudden we heard loud shouts. We listened. They were shouts of joy. The name of the French officer who had been sent to Constantinople burst from the throats of the palikars on all sides. It was evident he had brought the Sultan's answer, and that the answer was a favorable one. Do you not recollect the name? Said Mokoff, ready to aid the narrator's memory. Monte Cristo made a sign to her. I do not remember it, responded Hades. The noise increased. There was the sound of approaching footsteps. They were descending the steps to the cave. Selim made ready his lance. Soon a figure appeared in the gray twilight created by the rays of the day which penetrated the entrance of the cave. "Who goes there?" cried Selim. "Whoever it may be, advance no farther." "Glory be to the Sultan," said the figure. "He has granted full pardon to Vizier Ali, and not only grants him life, but restores him to his fortune and all his possessions." My mother uttered a cry of joy and pressed me to her heart. "Stop," cried Selim on perceiving that she was about to rush out of the cave. "You know I must have the ring." "You are right," replied my mother, and she fell on her knees, holding me up toward heaven as though, while praying to God for me, she wished to lift me up toward him. For the second time, Haiti paused, overcome by an emotion which made the perspiration break out in drops upon her forehead and her words choke in her parched throat. Monte Cristo poured a little iced water into a glass and handed it to her, saying with tenderness in which was mingled a suspicion of command, "Take courage, my child." Haiti wiped her eyes and forehead and continued. By this time, our eyes had become accustomed to the darkness, and we recognized the Pasha's envoy. He was a friend. Selim too recognized him, but the brave young man had one duty to fulfill. That was to obey. "In whose name do you come?" said he. "I come in the name of our master, Ali Tebelen." "If you come in the name of Ali, do you know what you have to hand me?" "Yes," said the messenger. "I bring the ring." So saying, he held his hand above his head, but from where we were it was too dark, and he too far away for Selim to distinguish and recognize the object he held up. "I see not what you have there," said Selim. "Come nearer, or if you so wish I will come nearer to you," replied the messenger. "Neither the one nor the other," replied the young soldier. "On the spot where you now stand, so that the rays of this light may fall on it, set down the object you wish to show me, and retire till I have seen it." "It shall be done," answered the messenger. Placing the symbol on the spot he indicated, he withdrew. Our hearts beat fast, for the object was actually a ring. But was it my father's ring? Still holding in his hand the lighted match, Selim went to the entrance, bent down, and picked up the token. "The master's ring," he exclaimed, kissing it. "All is well." Throwing the match on the ground, he trampled on it, and till it was extinguished. The messenger uttered a cry of joy and clapped his hands. At this signal, 4 of the Seraskier Korshil's soldiers rushed in, and Selim fell pierced by the dagger of each of the men. Intoxicated by their crime, though still pale with fear, they then rushed into the cave and made for the bags of gold. By this time my mother had seized me in her arms, and running nimbly along the windings known only to ourselves, reached some secret stairs where reigned a frightful tumult and confusion. The lower halls were filled with the armed ruffians of the Korshild, our enemies. My mother glued her eyes to a chink in the boards. There happened to be an aperture in front of me, and I looked through it. "What do you want?" we heard my father saying to some men who held their hands a piece of paper inscribed with letters of gold. "We wish to communicate to you the will of His Highness. Do you see this firman?" "I do," was my father's reply. "Well, read it. It demands your head." My father burst into laughter, more terrible to hear than the wildest threats, and he had not ceased when 2 pistol shots rang out and the 2 men were dead. The Palikars, who were lying face down all around my father, rose and began firing. The room became filled with noise, flames, and smoke. At the same time, firing started on the other side of the hall, and the boards all around us were soon riddled with shot. Oh, how handsome, how noble was the Vizier Ali Tebelen, my father, as he stood there in the midst of the shot, his scimitar in his hand, his face black with powder. How his enemies fled before him. "Selim, Selim," cried he, "guardian of the fire, do your duty." "Selim is dead," replied a voice which seemed to come from the depths of the kiosk, "and you, my lord Ali, are lost." At the same moment, a dull report was heard, and the flooring was shattered to atoms all around my father. 20 shots were fired from underneath through a gap thus created, and flames rushed up as from the crater of a volcano, and gaining the hangings, quickly devoured them. In the midst of this frightful tumult, 2 reports more distinctive than the others, and 2 cries more heart-rending than all the rest, petrified me with terror. Those 2 shots had mortally wounded my father, and it was he who uttered the 2 cries. Nevertheless, he would not fall, but stood clinging to a window. My mother shook the door in her efforts to force it open to go and die beside him, but the door was locked from the inside. All around him the Palikars were writhing in agony. 2 or 3 were only slightly or not at all wounded, leaped through the windows. The floor gave way entirely. My father fell on one knee. Instantly, 20 hands were stretched out, and 20 blows were dealt simultaneously at one man. My father disappeared in a blaze of fire stirred by those roaring demons as though hell had opened under his feet. I felt myself roll to the ground. My mother had fainted. Hades' arms fell to her side, and uttering a groan, she looked at the count as though to ask him whether he was satisfied with her obedience. Monte Cristo went up to her, and taking her hand, told her in Romaic, "Calm yourself, dear child, and console yourself in the thought that there is a God who punishes traitors." "It is a frightful story, Count," said Albert, alarmed at Hades' paleness, "and I reproach myself with having been so cruelly indiscreet." "It is nothing," replied Monte Cristo. Then placing his hand on the maiden's shoulder, he continued, "Haydée is a courageous girl, and she sometimes finds solace in recounting her troubles." "Because my sufferings remind me of your kindness, my lord," was the girl's eager response. Albert looked at her with curiosity, for she had not yet told him that he was most anxious to know, namely, how she had become the Count's slave. She saw his desire expressed in both the Count's and Albert's eyes, and continued, "When my mother recovered consciousness, we were before the Seraskier. 'Kill me,' she said to him, 'but preserve the honor of Ali's widow.' 'It is not me that you have to address yourself,' Koshid said. 'Then to whom?' 'To your new master.' 'Who is my new master?' 'Here he is,' said Koshid, pointing to one of those who had most contributed to my father's death. 'Then you became that man's property?' asked Albert. 'No,' responded Haydée. 'He did not dare keep us. He sold us to some slave merchants who were going to Constantinople. We crossed over Greece and arrived at the imperial gates in a dying condition, surrounded by a curious crowd who made way for us to pass. My mother followed the direction of their eyes, and with a cry suddenly fell to the ground, pointing to a head on a spike of the gate. Above this head were written the words, 'This is the head of Ali Tepelen, Pasha of Janina.' Weeping, I tried to raise my mother. She was dead. I was taken to the bazaar. A rich American bought me, had me educated, and when I was 13 years of age, he sold me to the Sultan Mohammed, from whom I bought her, as I told you, Albert, for an emerald similar to the one in which I keep my hashish pills," said the Count. "You are good, you are great, my lord," said Haydée, kissing Monte Cristo's hand. "I am very happy to belong to you." Albert was quite bewildered by all that he heard. "Finish your coffee," said the Count. "The story is ended." And that is Haydée's story. Now, Albert's father was left out of it, but I think we know who he is. So we'll see how that comes back to bite him in the butt. I'll see you guys next time.